Melissa, welcome to the New Property Show.
Thank you for having me.
So there's a solicitor, there's a conveyancer, and then there's a property law specialist. What are the differences?
Well, a property law specialist, when it comes to transactions, you've got two of those. So you can either use a conveyancer, a licensed conveyancer, or you can use a solicitor. So a lot of people blur the distinction between the two because you just think, oh, don't they all do the same thing? A solicitor can do a whole lot more where it requires some form of legal representation or legal advice in relation to a property transaction that a licensed conveyancer can't do. So if you think about it at a high level, a conveyancer is only licensed, trained and experienced to do the one thing, which is just the transaction itself or the minimum required for that transaction to go to settlement. But a property lawyer can do that plus a whole lot more that requires advice and representation.
So essentially, as I said, I deal with a lot of conveyances anyway, but a conveyancer can get you in.
Yep.
Solicitor can get you out.
Very good way of putting it.
Yep. So let's talk about transactions. So on the New Property Show, we cover everything from property, off the plan to established transactions. Let's start with established transactions. What are some of the things that you'd like to cover off for anybody buying a house out there? So we'll talk about terms, finance, clauses that they should really be aware of.
So it's not just enough to try and manage your commercial risk when it comes to buying, but the other major consideration is your legal risk, and that's not something that anyone should put on the back burner. So when you are buying in the property market, there's a few things that you can do to manage your risk. Risk management 101 is always get the contract looked over, ideally by a property lawyer, a seasoned property lawyer, because they'll be able to properly advise you on both the contract and the Section 32 statement. And that's, for those that don't know what that is, that's a statement that has legal disclosures that need to be made by law by every vendor. So it's good to have that advice on hand because you might want to negotiate price and some of the other commercial terms, but as part of that process, if you've got a solicitor looking at the contract and giving you advice, you can incorporate some of those legal risk management negotiations as well. So before you buy. So that's tip number one. Number two is get a building and pest inspection. Ideally before you buy, but we know that sometimes when you buy, time is of the essence and there might be other competition, you might not have time. So at the very least, make the contract subject to getting a building and pest inspection done. And that way you'll receive a report with information in relation to defects, structural integrity of the property,
etc. So if something comes back that way, for example, would you then therefore help them negotiate or work through a solution? Because there's an emotional part of the purchase, which is, hey, we've got the property, we're excited about it, it could be a family home. Then some defects have come back. Typically, they've already negotiated and set a price. On the vendor side, I wouldn't want to drop my price either. How do you work through that typically? Are you speaking to the agent or are you speaking to the purchaser themselves? Or there's a few people involved at that stage.
There is, and you have to assess what's going to be the most effective way to get that over the line. So, we can negotiate outcomes through the vendor's conveyancer, or if you are buying, you can negotiate directly through the agent. And there's a couple ways of doing it. Number one, I know as a vendor, if you are a vendor, you may not be willing to drop your price, but if you've got a purchaser presenting an unconditional offer, but they just don't like a couple of things that are majorly wrong with the property, you may be in a better position to renegotiate the price around that, number one. Or number two, if price is not the way to go with negotiations, you can try and incorporate some sort of provision in the contract that requires a vendor to fix a couple of those things before settlement. A vendor may be willing to do that if it's something that doesn't cost too much, for example. You just have to assess it on a case-by-case.
This one's just off the cuff, but let's say you're dealing with somebody and the other party solicitor is difficult to deal with. They're intentionally dragging the time out because they want clauses to expire. The building inspector, the building pest is due tomorrow and they haven't responded. Do you find that frustrating, I guess, trying to perform your duties and then you're getting a party that's just not carrying the weight?
if our client's in a position where they're meeting their due dates to get their building and pest inspection report, that's great.
Yeah.
There's no conflict in any way. But if we've got a scenario where we're running close to time, the client needs an extra day or two to get their inspection report. For those that don't know, a building and pest inspection report potentially can allow you to end a contract of sale if there's any major structural defects wrong with the property. You may be running behind a day or two, you want an extension to that due date, and you've got someone else, on, a conveyance or solicitor on the other side that's making your life difficult, like you say, with not responding or rejecting. So in that scenario, there's a couple of things. Number one, it can't hurt for a conveyancer, if you've got a conveyancer representing you, it can't hurt for them to pick up the phone and just have a chat to the other side.
Yeah.
I find that in our industry, a lot of practitioners are keyboard warriors and they don't put on their commercial thinking hat on.
So just give them a call.
Just give them a call, to work it out. And you never know, you might come, that might resolve the issue and you might get your extension that way. Or the other way to do it is, commercial and otherwise, if they're not coming to the table, just as a solicitor, it's important you need to advise the client of what their legal position is.
Excellent. So
what they can and can't do.
We're going to quickly change gears for a second. We're going to go over to off the plan.
Yep.
So we could just rattle off a few ideas here. So what are some of the challenges nowadays with buying off the plan that people need to be aware of?
We know at the moment there's a lot of issues with builder bankruptcies taking place, after the Porter Davis saga, as we all know about. It's been reported in the media. There's that, and then there's also financial security. So it would be a case of research the developer, find out who they are, or the builder, in fact. Get an idea of whether there's any reports about defective issues in other projects. Just do as much research as you can. And get an idea of their liquidity. It can't hurt to actually ask for financials at times, just to get an insight into their level of liquidity. Like one red flag, for example, would be if you ask for a domestic building warranty insurance certificate at the beginning and they don't want to give that to you until you pay them some sort of money for them to get it, I would be worried.
Yep.
Because that gives me an insight that they're just they haven't got as much cash, and then there's that risk of bankruptcy. So that's a really practical tip. And then the other issue is, of course, with the rise in building costs, we see that there may be provisions in contracts where builders are trying to increase the price, the base price, not through variations, but the actual base price, and having a lot more control over that. So that's one of the things we look out for if we're reviewing a domestic building
I think
contract.
It's also important for clients to physically go to the office where they're purchasing from.
Yep.
I've been to Google Maps before and I've seen basically what looks like a warehouse or a fish and chip shop, and that's the registered address. That's definitely a concern. Go to the Google reviews if you're seeing anything under a 3, a 2.7, 2.8, lack of calls, lack of this, lack of follow-up, also a concern as well. The old Facebook post doesn't hurt, really just going to social media. Has anyone had any experiences with that as well? And generally what I'd find is the red flags would be is how quickly and how much are they pushing you for deposits. If they're in a rush, like we need it now, send a screenshot, do it now, and they're following up continuously, they'd show that their liquidity isn't very strong.
Yes.
A bit of a concern. And last but not least, cost of services and why are you passionate about helping people purchase property?
I've been doing it for quite some time. I absolutely love helping everyday people, whether you're an individual, couple or family. There's usually a happy ending at the end of every transaction. You become the owner of a property and it's a really fulfilling feeling when we make someone's day. So we don't consider ourselves as conveyancers per se, we consider ourselves as day makers for people, and we just use conveyancing as a vehicle to do that for them.
Fantastic. So you like to instill happiness into others.
That's exactly right. That's
Great
our purpose.
Mission. You've been a fantastic guest. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.